I wasn't looking for a miracle, just something to keep the bills paid. After I lost my job at the bookstore, I spent 2 months eating canned soup and refreshing job boards that never changed. Rent was creeping in like mold, and every night I could hear the landlord arguing with someone else about eviction. So when I found the letter in my mailbox, a thick envelope with no stamp, just my name written in slanted ink, I thought it was some scam. But I opened it anyway. Desperation makes you careless. Inside was a single page. Seeking live-in housekeeper for historic Victorian home in Salem. $3,000 a month, room and board included. No prior experience necessary. Serious inquiries only. Contact Mrs. Catherine Eldridge, 49 Elm Street. It sounded fake. Too perfect. But I dialed the number. The woman on the other end had a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She spoke formally, almost coldly, and offered to meet the next morning. No interview over Zoom, no resume, just arrive promptly at 10. It was raining the next morning, of course. The kind of Salem rain that soaks your skin and spine. I wore the only blazer I owned and stood in front of number 49 Elm Street, a towering Victorian mansion that seemed to lean over the street like it was watching. The house was beautiful, yes, but wrong in that way old things sometimes are. Its windows were too dark. The garden looked too well kept for a place that felt so forgotten. And when I pressed the doorbell, the chime that rang out was deep and melodic, almost funereal. The door opened slowly. Miss Thompson? She was exactly as I imagined, mid-50s, impeccably dressed in black. Silver hair pulled into a bun, her eyes were gray and unreadable but sharp. Mrs. Eldridge, I said, trying to sound calm. You're punctual, that's good. She moved aside and let me in. The inside smelled of lavender, old wood, and candle wax. Not a hint of dust, not a single creaking board. Everything was pristine, too pristine. The tour began without small talk. She walked ahead in silence, gesturing occasionally. Library, sitting room, dining hall, guest wing. Each room looked like it belonged in a museum, not a home. Velvet curtains, mahogany floors, oil paintings whose eyes followed you. A grandfather clock that hadn't ticked once since I arrived. At the top of the stairs, she paused in front of a locked black door. This wing is off limits, she said. You will never enter. That is not part of your duties. I nodded. What else could I do? After the tour, she led me to the kitchen and poured tea without asking. If you accept the position, she said, you'll begin tomorrow. Your room is on the 3rd floor. Meals are your responsibility. The job is largely solitary. I rarely leave the study. You will not be disturbed unless necessary. I was ready to sign anything. That much money for housekeeping? I'd lived in shared apartments with moldy ceilings for less. Then she placed another sheet of paper on the table. These are the rules, she said. Non-negotiable. They are for your safety. I read them and felt my throat dry. 1. Turn on all lights when exiting any room. 2. If you hear crying, comfort the man who weeps. 3. Avoid the woman in the yellow dress. Do not let her see you. 4. If you hear a monkey, leave the house immediately. 5. Always check the basement light before leaving for the night. I looked up at her. Was this some kind of joke? I don't expect you to understand, she said. Only to obey. If you can do that, you'll be paid well and kept safe. I should have walked away, but I didn't. because my bank account had $42 left, and the last of my pride had dried up with it. I accept. She smiled, just faintly. Good. Be here tomorrow at 8 sharp, and pack light. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept reading the rules over and over, trying to convince myself it was some eccentric ritual, some rich old woman's fantasy. But something in her eyes, it didn't feel like fantasy. It felt like a warning. I started the very next morning. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray, like someone had drawn a curtain over the sun. It wasn't cold, but I kept shivering as I stepped through the front gate. Mrs. Eldridge met me at the door without a word. She simply handed me a brass key ring with 3 keys and disappeared into the shadows of the west hallway. The house was mine, for the day at least. I began in the east sitting room, dusting, folding, polishing. It felt strange, how clean everything already was, as if someone cleaned just for the sake of pretending to be human. The silver teapots gleamed. The books on the shelves were alphabetized and ancient. Every room looked lived in, but not lived. The walls, though, they watched. There were portraits, dozens, maybe hundreds, of stern men and pale women, none of them smiling. One painting in particular caught my eye. A man with deep-set eyes and a red waistcoat, holding a pocket watch in one hand and a half-burned letter in the other. His nameplate read, Edmund Eldridge, 1851 to 1903. At 2:14 p.m., something changed. I was in the main library on the 2nd floor. I had just stacked a row of yellowing medical texts when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Sobbing. Not muffled. Not subtle. Deep, human, heartbreaking sobs. It was coming from the parlor across the hallway. I froze, the feather duster still in my hand. And then, something clicked in my mind. Rule number 2. If you hear crying, comfort the man who weeps. I waited. Maybe it would stop. Maybe I imagined it, but it didn't. It grew louder, more broken, more desperate. I stepped into the hallway. The sound led me to the double doors of the 2nd floor parlor, a place I hadn't touched yet. I hesitated, hand on the doorknob. The crying was clearer now. Male, older, trembling with regret. He wasn't trying to be heard. He simply couldn't hold it in. I pushed the door open. Inside was dim. The curtains had been drawn halfway. A low fire flickered in the hearth. And there, in the center of the room, seated in a worn armchair, was a man. He was dressed in night clothes, an old-fashioned robe and slippers. His hair was white, but his face looked young and endlessly sad. He stared at the fire, hands wringing a handkerchief soaked in tears. He didn't look up when I entered. My instincts screamed at me to run. But the rule, I took a step forward. Sir, are you all right? His head turned slowly, like it was hard to move. His eyes locked onto mine, glass blue and unfocused, as if looking through me. She's gone, he whispered. I didn't say goodbye. Another tear rolled down his cheek, and something strange happened. The air shifted, grew heavy, like the room was pressing in from all sides. My vision darkened at the edges. The fire dimmed. The clock on the wall stopped ticking. But still, I didn't run. I walked closer, sat on the edge of the coffee table in front of him. I don't know what happened, I said quietly, but I'm here now. He blinked. For a second, just a second, he looked alive. Margaret, he breathed. Tell her I'm sorry. I reached forward to touch his hand, but my fingers passed through, cold, mist, empty. He faded, slowly, like smoke unraveling. And when he was gone, the fire flared bright again. The clock ticked. I was alone. That night, I couldn't eat. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. His eyes, his voice, the stillness. I wasn't afraid. Not really. What I felt was sorrow. Deep, sharp. Like someone else's grief had attached itself to me. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again, sitting by the fire, wrinkling his handkerchief, calling a name I didn't know. The next morning, I asked Mrs. Eldridge about the room. "The parlor on the second floor," I said. "Is it supposed to be used?" She stirred her tea once, twice, then looked up. "That room belongs to the house," she said. "If you are respectful, it will be respectful in return." The man, who was he? Someone who loved deeply and lost more than he could bear. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. That night, I made a quiet ritual of it. I turned on every light in the hallway, left the door to the parlor slightly ajar, and as I passed by, I whispered, "She forgives you. You're not alone." The third week in the Eldridge house began with silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hangs in the air like the breath before a scream. I had grown used to the routine. Clean in the mornings, cook my own dinner in the vast, too-empty kitchen, check the basement light before bed, and always, always turn on every single light when I left a room. I had followed every rule until I saw her. It started subtly. The first time I caught a flash of bright yellow at the end of the hallway, just before the corner turned toward the west wing, the forbidden part of the house. It was fast, barely there, but I could feel it, like a spark of static across my skin. A trick of the light, I told myself, a curtain catching the sun. But the hallways never caught sunlight. The windows were too thick, too old. 2 nights later, I saw it again. I was walking down the main staircase carrying a stack of folded sheets when something moved on the landing below. Not fast this time, slow, deliberate. I froze mid-step. There she was, a woman, standing motionless in the center of the hallway. She was facing away, her hair long and brown, reaching the middle of her back. She wore a dress, bright yellow, high-collared, glowing faintly under the dim chandelier. The air went cold. My arms broke into goosebumps. The sheets dropped from my hands, spilling over the stairs. My mind raced back to the rules. 3. Avoid the woman in the yellow dress. Do not let her see you. I backed up, slowly, one step, then another, but I couldn't look away. Something about her felt wrong. Her body didn't move like it should. It was too still, like a painting that might blink if you stared long enough. Then she turned her head, just a little. Not enough to see her face, but enough to know she heard me. My breath caught. My legs locked. The chandelier flickered. Once. Twice. And then she started to walk. Not toward me, not away, just along the hallway, gliding, each footfall eerily silent on the hardwood. I slipped backward, ducking behind the banister, crouching low. My heart hammered in my ears. I clutched the railing so hard my knuckles went white. And then she was gone. Not vanished. Just behind a corner. But even after she was out of sight, I couldn't move. I stayed there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, listening, watching the shadows breathe on the walls. When I finally stood, I didn't finish the laundry. I went straight to my room and locked the door. That night, I dreamed of her. She stood in the center of my room, yellow dress glowing like fire under moonlight. But she had no face, just smooth skin, no eyes, no mouth. And still, I knew she was looking at me. When I woke up, the sheets I'd dropped on the staircase were folded neatly at the foot of my bed. I confronted Mrs. Eldridge the next morning. "I saw her," I said, without sitting down. "The woman in the yellow dress." She didn't flinch, didn't blink. "Did she see you?" "I don't think so." "Then you are still safe. Who is she?" She poured tea into a cracked porcelain cup, her hands steady. "A daughter who was never meant to be buried. A mind that broke before the body followed." "I need more than riddles." "No, you don't," she said coldly. "You need to follow the rules." There was something brittle in her voice, like a wall about to crack. But I backed off, for now. Over the next few days, the yellow dress haunted me. I never saw her face, but I always saw the corner of her hem turning down the hall, or a sliver of yellow fabric as I passed a mirror. Sometimes I heard heels clicking when I was alone on the 3rd floor, even though no one ever walked there but me. One night, I was brushing my teeth when the lights in the hallway flickered. The mirror in front of me caught a glow. Behind me, yellow. I dropped the toothbrush, swung around, nothing. Just the hallway, dark, empty. But my reflection stayed in the mirror. For half a second longer than I did. I started leaving lights on everywhere, even when I knew it would upset Mrs. Eldridge. I'd light candles, crack open doors, anything to keep her from moving freely in the dark. I memorized escape routes, kept my shoes by the door, slept with a flashlight under my pillow. But deep down, I knew. She wasn't just wandering, she was hunting. And one night, if I wasn't careful, she would see me. The house had grown restless. Lights flickered more often. Doors I'd left open were suddenly shut. Rooms I had just cleaned were dusty again. And every night, I woke at exactly 3:09 a.m. No sound, no dream. Just an ice-cold chill in the air, like someone had opened a window inside my chest. It was around this time that I started hearing scratching. At first, it came from the attic. Tiny, irregular, like claws on wood. I told myself it was rats. Then one morning, I found a banana peel on the floor outside the guest bathroom, blackened, half-rotted. No one in the house had eaten a banana. Not me, not Mrs. Eldridge. I didn't pick it up. I swept it into the trash with the broom held at arm's length. That should have been my warning. The 4th rule had always felt like the most absurd. 4. If you hear a monkey, leave the house immediately. It sounded like something from a children's book, like a joke meant to unsettle. But by then, I had already comforted a ghost and hidden from a faceless woman in yellow. So when I heard the first hoot echo down the west hallway, I did not laugh. It was just after sunset. The house was quiet. I had just finished checking the basement light, something I did every night now, more from dread than routine. And then it came, a low, guttural wah, not human, not animal, then a scuffling noise, something running, on all fours, fast. I dropped the flashlight. There was no thought, no hesitation. I ran, down the stairs, past the grandfather clock, through the library. I fumbled with the front door, cursing under my breath, my hands too slick with sweat to turn the knob properly. Behind me, I heard furniture overturn, glass breaking, then the scream. It wasn't a monkey's cry, not really. It was high-pitched and wet, like a scream from something that didn't have lungs, just rage. It echoed across the house like an alarm bell from hell. And then I felt it. The breath. Hot. Right at the back of my neck. I threw the door open and fell onto the front steps, scraping my knee. I didn't look back. Not until I was across the street, panting in the neighbor's bushes like a lunatic. From there, I watched the house. Nothing moved. Not in the windows. Not in the yard. No lights turned on. It just sat there. Perfect. Silent. As if it hadn't just tried to kill me. I waited an hour before walking back. When I finally did, the front door was closed. No sign of damage, no overturned chairs, no broken glass, like it had never happened. Mrs. Eldridge was waiting for me in the kitchen. She was stirring soup, calm, silent. I didn't speak. I just stood there, bleeding and shaking. After a while, she set the spoon down and looked at me. "You heard it, didn't you?" "What? Is it?" "A remnant," she said quietly. "From a time when men bought beasts from other continents to entertain guests. One escaped. It changed. Changed. Something got into it. Or it got into something. No one knows. It killed the boy of the house. Tore him apart in front of the fireplace." She gestured toward the faint scar on the wooden floor I had dusted a dozen times. Its soul was never at rest. Edmund found it, bound it, and now it guards. Guards what? Secrets. So you keep it locked up like the others? I don't keep anything. I inherit. This house doesn't belong to me. It belongs to them now. I stared at her. Then why am I here? She looked at me like the question was too simple to answer. Because the house still remembers what it means to be human. And sometimes it needs reminding. That night, I didn't sleep in my room. I dragged a blanket into the library and sat by the cold fireplace, surrounded by books. It was the only room that felt neutral. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept repeating the rules like a prayer. Turn on the lights. Comfort the man. Avoid the yellow woman. Leave when the monkey screams. Check the basement light. Check the basement light. I hadn't checked it that night. My heart sank. I lit a candle. My hands shook. The basement door was at the far end of the kitchen. I moved slowly, quietly, like something might hear me thinking. The knob was cold. I opened it. Darkness like ink greeted me, heavy, suffocating. I stepped down one creaking stair at a time, the candle barely cutting through the black. The light switch was halfway down. I reached for it, and it was on. Already on. But the light above me wasn't working. I looked up. The bulb had been unscrewed. Just enough. Not broken, not burnt out, unscrewed. Like someone or something had been waiting. Watching. Ready. I turned and ran. I didn't go back into the basement for 3 days. I kept the door locked, taped a note to it in red marker. Do not enter after dark. The rules had saved me. Again. But they weren't enough anymore. I needed answers. I needed to know what I was living in. That morning, I took the bus to the Salem Public Library. I hadn't been outside in weeks. The sun felt foreign. The normal sounds of the street, the hum of traffic, laughter, distant dogs barking, were a jarring reminder that the world hadn't stopped just because the Eldridge house existed. Inside the library, the air was dry and still. A small woman with round glasses and a voice like crumpled paper asked what I was looking for. "Elm Street," I said. "Number 49, the old Victorian. I think it used to belong to the Whitmore family." Her eyebrows rose. "That house has stories," she said softly. "But yes, It was the Whitmores. She led me to the archives. I spent hours in the basement of that library. Page after page, record after record, old newspaper clippings, death notices, property transfers, photos so faded they looked like ghosts themselves. What I found made my skin crawl. The house was built in 1847 by Thomas Whitmore, a wealthy merchant who had made his fortune importing textiles from Europe. He wanted a legacy, something grand, something eternal. And so he built the manor on Elm Street. But it was never a home. It was a mausoleum. His wife, Margaret Whitmore, died of consumption in 1852. There were no records of a funeral, just a doctor's note. His daughter Elizabeth died at 16 in 1856 during a scarlet fever outbreak. I stared at her photo in a faded obituary. Long brown hair, a high-collared dress, and something bright. Yellow. My blood ran cold. More tragedies followed. A fire in 1870. A child suffocated in his crib in 1884. Another man fell from the third-floor balcony in 1891. And then, in 1923, a headline in bold, block letters. Young son of local family mauled to death by escaped exotic pet. A capuchin monkey, imported from Brazil, trained to do tricks. One day it snapped. The boy's body was found in pieces near the fireplace. The photo below the headline showed a familiar rug, the same one in the main parlor of the house. It hadn't been replaced. I sat back in my chair, shaking. The man who cried, the woman in yellow, the screaming monkey. They weren't symbols, they were memories, souls trapped in the walls of that house, bound by something unnatural. And then I found something that made my hands go numb. A record from 1895. A name I had seen only once before. Edmund Eldridge. He had purchased the house after the Whitmore lineage ended. But he wasn't just a collector. He was known, quietly and in obscure journals, as a practitioner of the occult. There was a handwritten note from a local historian. Edmund Eldridge believed the soul could be tethered. That grief and rage made excellent anchors. He claimed to have created a ritual that turned spirits into wards, a supernatural defense against invaders. He called them the Bound Keepers. My mouth went dry. He hadn't just found the house. He had turned it into a prison. I photocopied everything, shoved it into my bag. And before I left, I asked the librarian a question I hadn't planned on. Was there ever a housekeeper named Sarah Collins? The woman frowned, then nodded. Worked there for over a decade. Quiet woman. Left town suddenly about 5 years ago. Do you know where the house was older than its brick and wood? It was a machine. One built on death, fueled by silence and guarded by ghosts. And I was done being afraid of it. It took me 4 days to find her. 4 days of pretending everything was fine, smiling politely at Mrs. Eldridge, folding laundry in haunted halls, turning on every light like it still mattered. But each night, I heard whispers in the walls. Not words, names. Half-formed regrets clinging to plaster. They knew I was trying to set them free. The church by the cemetery was small and silent, cloaked in ivy and shadow. I waited until just before noon, when the sun was at its peak and the dead were at rest. A priest met me at the door. I asked about Sarah Collins. He didn't blink, just nodded. She comes every Thursday, he said. Leaves a letter in the old donation box, never speaks. Do you know where she lives? Out by the edge of town, past Hollow Pine, the old mill road. Will she talk to me? The priest hesitated. "Not unless she thinks you've seen them." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He handed me a slip of paper with an address and a warning. "If you go to her, go with honesty and don't expect comfort." Her house was a crooked cabin of wood and time. The yard was overgrown. The curtains were always drawn. A wind chime hung on the porch, made of bones and rusted keys. It didn't make music, just a faint clicking, like teeth grinding in the dark. I knocked once, twice. She opened the door before the third. Sarah Collins looked nothing like I expected. She was young, mid-30s maybe, but her eyes were so old, the kind of old that doesn't come from years, but from seeing too much. "You're from the house," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. My name is Emily. I work for Catherine Eldridge." "I know." She stepped aside. "Come in, but don't touch anything." Her home was filled with relics, drawings, journal pages, crude charcoal sketches of the Eldridge house from every angle. On the kitchen table sat a jar of ash labeled Elizabeth. I didn't ask. She poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from me, never once looking away. "How long have you been there?" 2 months. "How many have you seen?" 3 for sure, maybe more. The man who cries, the woman in yellow, the monkey. She closed her eyes. "Then you've survived longer than most. You were the housekeeper before me. For 15 years. Why did you leave?" Her hands trembled slightly. "Because I almost forgot what living felt like." She told me everything. How the house had once been beautiful. How she took the job thinking it was just a strange, lonely old place. And then she met the spirits. How comforting the crying man had made her cry too. How the woman in yellow once stood outside her bedroom for 3 straight hours, unmoving. How the monkey once threw a dining chair across the room while she prayed. But they weren't evil, she said. They were trapped, twisted by time and pain, but not evil. What trapped them? Edmund Eldridge, she said with a bitterness that felt centuries old. He was obsessed with preservation, of legacy, of control. So he created a ritual, a binding. One by one, he tied the souls to the house, like pins in a doll. And Catherine kept it going? Number she just refused to undo it. Why? Sarah leaned in. Because to undo it, you need to confront them. All of them. Know their names, their deaths, their pain, and then give them the choice. Stay and protect the house, or move on. Is that in the grimoire? Yes, but it's not just a book. It's a contract. The moment you open it, the house sees you as something other. What happens if I fail? Sarah's eyes locked onto mine. Then the house keeps you. I sat in silence. The tea had gone cold in my hands. Why are you telling me this? Because I couldn't finish it. I tried. I found the grimoire. I even started reading the rituals, but I wasn't strong enough. What stopped you? She turned her head slowly. I saw my own reflection walk away from me. My skin crawled. Emily, she whispered, do you still dream in your own voice? I didn't answer, because I hadn't for weeks. Before I left, Sarah handed me a small envelope. Inside was a key, brass, heavy, with the number 3 etched into it. The study, she said. He kept the grimoire locked in the 3rd drawer of the desk. Don't touch anything else. What happens if I do? It remembers, and it bites. That night, I returned to the house. Catherine was in her room. The halls were quiet. The fire in the parlor was low. I walked past the portraits, past Edmund Eldridge's cold, painted stare, and straight to the study. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, it smelled of old smoke and wax, The desk loomed under a dusty chandelier. I crossed the room, opened the third drawer, and there it was. The grimoire, bound in black leather, clasped in tarnished silver. The cover bore a single word etched in Latin: tenere, to bind. I took a deep breath and opened it. The grimoire was heavier than it looked, not just in weight, in presence. Holding it felt like holding something alive, something that breathed with the rhythm of 100 dead voices. Its pages were thick, handwritten in 2 languages, Latin and English. The ink was faded, but the spells were clear. Names, symbols, ritual circles, a system, a manual for binding the human soul. I spent the night reading by candlelight. The first third of the book was dedicated to theory, Edmund's twisted philosophy on legacy, loyalty, and control. He believed death was not the end, merely an opportunity to convert spirit into function. Fear and longing are the strongest chains, he wrote. If you speak to the dead in the language of grief, they will listen. And if you promise them purpose, they will serve. The rest of the book described the ritual, painstakingly specific steps, the exact alignment of stars, the tools, the preparation of the body, the final whisper that sealed a soul to a place. And, buried deep in the final pages, a reversal, the unbinding, the cost, knowledge, empathy, and the willingness to let go. When I finished, dawn had arrived. I hadn't slept. The house was quiet, but not still. It was watching. I could feel it in the way the wood creaked beneath my feet, the way shadows recoiled from the light, the way the portraits in the hallway seemed to lean ever so slightly as I passed. It knew what I had learned. I found Mrs. Eldridge in the conservatory, tending to a single white orchid under glass. She didn't look up. "You found it," she said. I said nothing. "You opened it." Still, silence. She finally turned, her eyes tired and distant. "Then we don't have much time. You could have told me the truth from the beginning. Would you have stayed? But I would have known what I was choosing." She nodded slowly. "And now you do." I held the book in front of her. This is wrong. These people, these spirits, they aren't protecting the house. They're trapped in it." "They are both," she said. "Prisoners, yes, but they also keep others safe. Would you prefer the monkey roam free? Would you sleep soundly with Elizabeth drifting through walls, screaming? They deserve peace. They are peace. They are order. We've had no break-ins, no fires, no murders for decades because they are always watching." I stepped forward. "At what cost?" Her face tightened. "My mother died here. My brother vanished. My father locked himself in the basement and never came out again. You think I don't understand the cost?" She slammed her palm against the orchid's glass cover. The flower trembled. "I've suffered for this house. We all have." "Then let them go." Her voice dropped. "I can't." "Why not?" She looked me dead in the eye. "Because if I do, I lose everything." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The grimoire pulsed like a heartbeat in my hands. I saw her not as a villain, but as a woman caught in the teeth of tradition, raised by silence, bound by duty, afraid to lose the only thing she still controlled. But I also saw the truth. She didn't need the house. The house needed her. Someone to remember, to believe, to feed the system. "Come with me," I said gently. She blinked. "What?" "Help me unbind them. Let's do it together. You said they protected the house, right? Maybe, if we ask, they still will. But this time, they get to choose. And if they say no, then we let them go." She stared at me. Her lip trembled. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If we do this, if we make a mistake, the house could collapse. Or worse, it could survive without them. Then we rebuild it the right way." I stepped forward, placed the grimoire on the table between us. With truth, not chains. A long silence passed. Then, slowly, she reached forward. Her fingers touched the cover, and she whispered, "Tell me what I need to do." The ritual had to begin at dusk, not night, not day, the hour between. The grimoire called it the thinning, a veil where the dead could hear the living and choose whether to listen. Catherine lit the candles. I drew the circles. There were 5 of them, one for each bound soul. I had learned their names. 1. Thomas Whitmore, the grieving father. 2. Elizabeth Whitmore, the girl in yellow. 3. Margaret Whitmore, his wife, unseen but always present. 4. The unnamed boy, torn by the monkey. 5. The monkey itself, once a creature, now something else. Each name had to be written in ash. Each circle had to be filled with an item tied to their memory. A book, a locket, a burned slipper, a marble, a piece of rope. We worked in silence. Every board in the house creaked with tension. "They're watching," Catherine whispered. "Good," I said. "They deserve to see it happen." We began with Thomas. Catherine stood in his circle, holding a cracked pocket watch. "Thomas Whitmore," I said, voice steady. "You were a husband, a father. You mourned and stayed. But now you are seen, you are remembered, and you are free." The room darkened, and then, faintly, I heard sobbing, but not hopeless. It was like the first deep breath after crying too long. And then, silence. The candle in his circle extinguished itself. Next was Elizabeth. Her circle trembled as we approached. "Elizabeth," I said, "you were 16, full of color. You never had a choice, but you don't have to wander anymore." A shadow appeared in the corner, a figure in a yellow dress. I looked away. Reflex, but Catherine placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered. "She's just afraid." I turned, and for the first time, saw her face. She wasn't angry. She was lonely. I stepped forward and whispered, "You're not forgotten." She faded like mist in morning sun. Another candle, gone. Margaret was next. Though we had never seen her, the house always felt like hers. The locket in the circle trembled. "Margaret Whitmore," Catherine said, "you kept this home even in death. We're sorry, but you may rest now." A scent of lilacs filled the air. A cold breeze swept through the room. And then, quiet warmth. The candle snuffed out gently, like a kiss goodnight. Then came the boy. No name. Just a marble in a child's sock, burned around the edges. "We don't know your name," I said, choking back tears, "but we know your pain, and we see you now." A giggle echoed, sad and small, and then silence. One candle remained. The last circle was empty, except for the piece of rope. Frayed, stained. "What do we say to it?" I asked. "Nothing," Catherine replied. "It doesn't listen. It never did." The room grew colder. The chandelier above us shook. The wind outside began to howl. The floorboards cracked underfoot. And then, the scream. The same bone-shattering, wet, furious sound I had heard the night I fled. The monkey's rage filled the house like a rising tide. It didn't want to be released. It wanted to stay. "Emily!" Catherine shouted. "The grimoire!" I opened the final page. There was no Latin, no symbols, just a single sentence. "If it chooses rage, give it silence." I dropped the book, covered my ears, closed my eyes, and refused to hear it. The sound peaked, then shattered, like glass breaking across time, and just like that, silence. Total, perfect silence. The final candle flickered, then died. It was done. We didn't speak for a long time. The house felt different. Lighter. Sad, but no longer heavy. Like something had finally been allowed to breathe. The next morning, I walked through every room. The crying had stopped. No shadows moved. The lights stayed on. Catherine joined me on the front steps. "They're gone," she said softly. "Do you regret it?" "No," she said. "I only regret waiting this long." We never found the rope again. The grimoire crumbled to dust 2 days later. The basement light never flickered again. I stayed at the house a little longer, not as a keeper, but as a witness. Sometimes at sunset, I still light a candle in each corner, not out of fear, but out of remembrance. They weren't guardians. They weren't monsters. They were people. And now, they are free. Months have passed since the ritual. The Eldridge house still stands, but it no longer breathes with shadows. No more footsteps in the attic. No more weeping in the walls. Just silence. Peaceful, honest, final. Catherine has since moved away. Somewhere quiet. By the ocean, I think. She sends postcards, always unsigned. But the handwriting is unmistakable. I still live in Salem, not in the house. But I pass by Elm Street sometimes. The windows are boarded up now. The garden has grown wild. But on certain evenings, when the sun is low, I swear I see candlelight flicker behind the curtains. And sometimes, I stop. I bow my head, and I whisper, "Thank you. For watching. For waiting. For letting go." Not all houses forget. Some remember. Not out of malice, but out of mourning. And sometimes, that's the scariest part of all.